Hey, I have a lot of stuff to say about a project that's been in the works for a long time. My guitar. It's the second guitar that I built, and it was very ambitious. When I started it, I was like, oh, I want it to do everything, so I planned to have this huge electronics cavity, and so I quickly kind of finished building the guitar itself, which is this guitar right here. I finished building this beast probably somewhere between 3 to 4 years ago, and then it sat for a long time without electronics. I had routed it out. I had drilled a couple holes, but one of the difficulties I had was all of my plans for all of this electronics hardware was all kind of really expensive. So I tried to figure out and research if it was actually even worth it. And I wound up finding that my initial aspirations of having a MIDI guitar, I think, were somewhat dashed by the realities of MIDI guitar being not so great, because it always kind of winds up with some errors, and maybe a note doesn't come on or it doesn't turn off. And things like that are very problematic for any sort of live playing, or even if you just want your instrument to feel responsive, like it's doing what you want it to do. And I myself own a MIDI guitar system that's quite a nice one, and it still leaves a lot to be desired, which just kind of sucks. So at that point in time, the guitar just kind of sat around for a while as I was trying to figure out, I guess, what to do. And about a year ago, I, in earnest, decided to approach the guitar again and kind of finish everything up. I wound up picking up a ton of electronics for it, new guitar hardware. Those are Seymour Duncan pickups. There's a ton of stuff on the top. I tried to make it not look too imposing, which I think it kind of almost does. But when you look in the back, you're like, what's that? That's not a quarter pin, that's... what is... there's a mess of things on the inside of this guitar. There's a number of different boards, lots of stacked potentiometers, extra switches, and 12 preamplifiers. No, more preamplifiers than that, but oh boy, there's a lot of stuff. And it doesn't use a 1/4-inch jack. It uses a 13-pin cable. It locks in, and there are 13 pins in that beast. Because there's a lot of audio data that gets pushed out to here. Not just audio data, audio signals. This is a control box. The breakout box for the guitar. And when you look at the back of it, you might then be like, what? Seriously? Does it have USB and Ethernet? It has HDMI. It's got a lot of RCA jacks, and it currently has 3 amplifiers hooked up to it. That is all the result of Oh boy. Yeah, a year of thinking about how to hook up all this stuff, and months of soldering things together and testing and troubleshooting and working through problems, and it has just recently kind of gotten to the point where it works. It does the things that I had kind of hoped that it would do. So now I will give you a brief demo of what it can do without explaining too much more in depth, because I could probably talk forever about it. 3 amplifiers, one for the magnetic pickups, one for the acoustic pickups, and one for the computer system inside the guitar that does all sorts of other magic. And yeah, and then you're like, wait a minute, an acoustic guitar. Yeah, an acoustic guitar. Very convincingly sounding like an acoustic guitar. Oh, cat, glorious. Those are the magnetic pickups. So the magnetic pickups, you can tell, certainly work. And the last amplifier here has the other sound that's been routed through the other preamps, and then a quad-core computer that lives inside this box. So that's a slight demo there, without too much explanation of what's really going on with this guitar, which I will get into in just a moment. Now, this guitar, I tried to build it as carefully as I could, with as much forethought as I could. There's a lot of electronics, and I had thought that there was going to be a lot of electronics, but at some point in time in the development of this guitar, I recognized that there were too many electronics, and I couldn't just conveniently, for anybody's sake, fit them all onto into the guitar. itself, which is where this breakout box came from. It's just made out of walnut and purple heart, but it houses a Raspberry Pi B+. It's a quad-core 1.6 gigahertz computer with HDMI and a gig of RAM. It's kind of a beast. It's insane that we have computers like that. It blows my mind. But the audio data and all the signals from all the complicated electronics inside the guitar get sent over a 13-pin cable. That 13-pin cable is necessary because I have power that needs to go to the guitar. There's 6 different channels necessary for getting the signal from each of the strings separately. The magnetic pickups have their own channel. The acoustic sound has its own channel. And then inside the guitar, I have a rotary encoder as well. This thing there. That has a button, and it twists around in either direction infinitely. I wrote some Python which interprets the voltage signals that generates. Those signals have to go down that cable to get to the computer inside to run the script to understand the stuff. Wow, there's a lot of stuff. This guitar, I think I've decided to name it The Never, because I think that's representative of a lot of things. Kind of like when I'll probably be done working on it, and or the amount of ways you can interact with it. The magnetic pickups are housed with this plate of leopard wood that I put together. And if you notice, there are little buttons that blend in on the side. These buttons control the coil splitting and other functionalities inside these pickups. The pickups are Seymour Duncan P rails, and for the neck and bridge, the middle pickup is a Seymour Duncan STK S7 vintage hot rails. These buttons are set up in such a way that if I click this, it coil splits it to the P90 here. If I click this, it splits it to the rail. When they're both open, it's in series humbucking, and when they're both down, it's in parallel humbucking. This is either a noiseless single coil, or you can click that to split it and make it a noisy single coil. The bridge pickup works the same way the neck does. Now, in addition to that, each magnetic pickup has its own stacked volume and tone knob. These are 2 independent potentiometers stacked on top of each other, so each of these 3 have their own volume and tone control. And there's an extra switch hidden in all of these. The switch on the push-pull on these stacked potentiometers is controlling the phase of these pickups. Each of them has a phase control that way. All of that, along with the 6-way switch here, which selects either the neck, the middle, or the bridge pickup, or it selects the bridge and the middle, all of the pickups, or the neck and the bridge. That amounts to a tremendous amount of combinations. I kind of went through and wrote it all down to do the math, and it's like 372 different ways that could be set up. There are never-ending options here. The acoustic pickups are powered by really this bridge. It starts here from the bridge where this is a Schaller Hannes bridge with Piezo pickups. Each single string has its own individual pickup underneath it, which routes into the guitar, and it routes to a switch, because I haven't figured out a better way to solve a problem of flipping that properly between the acoustic emulation board and the circuit for the Pi, the computer inside the control box. The acoustic emulation board is by Graphtech, the Acoustaphonic. It is, I think it's a very nice sound that it provides, and I might just try to build my own and solve the problem a little bit differently, but currently I rely on a switch to flip between them. The other half of the system, or the other third of the system, is the sound that I get that runs through the Raspberry Pi. After I flip the switch on the guitar, that actually actuates a 6-pole double throw switch that just manually, physically flips all of the signal from getting summed in the acoustic board to being split, and it runs through a preamp that I built inside the guitar. That preamp just takes the very high impedance and low amplitude signal from the piezo pickups and makes it stronger waveform to push all down the channels into the control box. The control box has just a lot of stuff in it. Let's see if I can show you. Now, inside the control box there are a lot of components. The 13-pin connector gets split out, and the signal gets routed any number of ways. The Raspberry Pi is able to deal with the audio data by means of an add-on card for it from some folks at audioinjector.net. Their Octo Pi or Octo sound card. It has 6 inputs and 8 outputs, which allows me to have every one of the individual strings have its own channel that can get manipulated digitally and then pushed back out another high quality analog to digital converter. That goes out through either the 8 RCA outputs, or one of them is also hooked up to a standard TRS jack, and a few more by means of another preamplifier board which I built in here. The Pi itself is running some software that is just phenomenal. For one, the Raspbian operating system. I mean, I can't ever say enough for open source software and community things. I think it's great. Raspbian is running headless on the Pi, and I installed on it some software called Modep. Modep is an open source, again, version of some software that these folks at Mod Duo make, and they have their own product that is a pedal that can house this and do like all of this stuff. It's really crazy, but what that can't exactly do that this can is I have every single one of the strings of the guitar here, E, A, D, G, B, E, able to have its own independent signal chain. And this, you can see, I've got all of them just routed in through here, but the software is phenomenal. It's like, oh, I want to have extra distortion pedals. Cool, well, let me drag and drop that. I'll hook this up here. Oh. And put that back through there. Maybe I want to have the other high string. So now both of my the 2 high strings have their signal getting routed through these Big Muff Pis in addition to everything else. Now the rotary encoder on the guitar also generates MIDI information, which is hooked up into this software. Let me see if I can focus this properly. So I can rotate the rotary encoder and adjust the signal level on the volume pedal. And I also have it set so the button engages and disengages. Another effect, which is the Tube Screamer pedal clone here in the digital thing, which is how I was just able to click a button on my guitar earlier to turn on some distortion. There it is. So that's a lot of years of work and R&D and development and stuff. The mathematical like truth of things is when you have 6 inputs and 8 outputs and 294 effects, and you can write more effects for it and use that in combination with other things. Possibilities are like a 10 with 600 zeros after it. 10 to the 602nd power, according to my math. But, yeah. The never. Soon I will be recording actual stuff with it and using it to do cool things, like record more videos. When?